In today's episode, we're going to talk about the wonderful world of proteins. Proteins are all around our body. We use them in our daily lives, and they do amazing things to keep us going.
Protein design just won a Nobel Prize, and we're going to do a mini series of episodes here to talk about AlphaFold and other AI systems used to design proteins, whether people can increasingly design dangerous proteins, not just medicines, and whether protein design can help us get cures for some of the toughest diseases that still plague humanity.
But first, let's start with the basics. You might remember being in high school biology and seeing a simple diagram of a cell. It probably looked a bit like a fried egg or a sunny side up. There's the nucleus, which was a bit like the egg yolk. And then there were a few other things scattered around, like mitochondria and ribosomes. But that was a massive simplification. In reality, cells are incredibly busy. There are billions of molecules in every cell, including loads of proteins, which have different functions. So let me just think about, what are the different things that the proteins are doing? Well, there are structural proteins. They provide shape and strength to cells. There are storage proteins. They store little molecules. There are signaling proteins that help cells communicate with each other. So insulin, for example, is a hormone, and it's made in the pancreas, and it tells cells to take up glucose from the bloodstream. And that lowers blood sugar after eating. There are also transport proteins that move molecules between cells. Hemoglobin, for example, is a protein in red blood cells that binds to oxygen and carries it around in the blood. There are also enzymes. Enzymes speed up chemical reactions in our body by lowering the activation energy needed for them. There are regulatory proteins that control other proteins and pathways. And there are defense proteins that protect us from attack. So, antibodies are a type of protein. Snakes and spiders have venoms, which are proteins that help them disable their threats. And so, there are so many different types of jobs that a protein might have. And many proteins have multiple jobs at the same time. And this means that this basic diagram view that you might have had of a cell was quite simple. In reality, the cell is extremely busy. It's more like a bustling city. And there are literally billions of molecules, proteins, DNA, RNA, fats, sugars, and ions, all moving around, reacting, and interacting with each other. Every part of the cell has its own job, and it's a bit like the different districts in a city. There's a great blog post by Nico McCartney where he describes this, and I thought it would be helpful just to have a sense of what's going on. He says, a microbe's guts are a veritable time square, crowded with sugars, proteins, and water molecules that ricochet and smash into each other billions of times each second. Space is limited. Bacteriums inside are 70% water by mass. The other 30% is dominated by proteins first, followed by RNA and lipids. DNA accounts for just 1%. And all of this stuff fits inside a volume that is 1/4 of a liter.
That's a lot of proteins, and I can't even see one of them.
Right. They're so small. And so if you think of this city of each cell, the nucleus is something like the city hall. It's like managing the information. It has instructions for what should happen. There are mitochondria, the power stations of the cell. There are ribosomes that construct new proteins. And then there are proteins that are the workers and the machines of the city, but they're also the structural components and the signaling molecules and all of these things.
Our body is doing so much with all of those proteins. Are proteins used outside of the body too?
They are. In fact, if you've done any cooking, you would know, for example, that chemical reactions change the proteins that you're cooking with. So, for example, if you cook an egg white, it becomes firm when it's cooked. That's because the heat denatures the proteins, it makes them unfold, and then it makes them coagulate into a different kind of mesh, and that makes it opaque. There's also gluten, which is a protein that gives bread its stretchy texture. That's made of two proteins. There are also lots of proteins that are used in industry and biotechnology. So if you've done your laundry recently, you might have used a detergent that was made of enzymes, and the enzymes break down stains like fat or blood. And then there are a bunch of proteins that are used in baking and brewing and textile manufacturing. And of course, there are lots of proteins that are used in medicine as well. So I mentioned that antibodies are a type of protein, and lots of medicines are types of antibodies. There's also insulin, which people use in diabetes. It's a protein that is also a therapeutic drug.
What actually are proteins? What do they look like and how do they form?
Proteins are long chains of amino acids. So you can sort of think of that as like beads on a string, and then that string or that chain is folded in to some kind of 3D shape. So the string is the protein's backbone, and each bead is an amino acid, and each amino acid has unique features. So as this string folds into a structure, you can kind of imagine that maybe happening at a small scale. Maybe there's like a little helix of the string in some place, or maybe there are two parallel strings next to each other. But imagine that we have to kind of zoom out, and this whole 3D shape of the protein could also be connected to another protein. It could be two proteins together, making a protein complex.
How is that made? I know I eat some protein, but I think we make some too.
And that's right. So you have lots of DNA in your cells, and the DNA, which is the code of life, is the instructions for which proteins to make and how they should look. And so the DNA is transcribed into RNA, which is typically this temporary molecule. And then the RNA is then translated into protein by ribosomes. And so they sort of form one by one into this chain and then rapidly fold into a much bigger structure. And this was kind of interesting to me because when I was reading this, I was thinking, okay, how did the first protein that was ever discovered look? What did people think
Right.
when they first saw it? And that was fascinating because the first proteins whose structure was determined was in 1958, and that was myoglobin. And this was determined by John Kendrew, a British scientist. And when he discovered this, it was only 4 years after the discovery of DNA structure. And DNA is, of course, very beautiful. It has this like symmetrical structure of this, helix. And he was really disappointed when he figured
Yeah.
out what myoglobin looked. He wrote in this paper, perhaps the most remarkable features of the molecule are its complexity and its lack of symmetry.
Oh no, it's ugly.
But in hindsight, the irregularity is exactly what makes protein so powerful. So it's not really like DNA, which has this kind of linear um, messaging. So it has the code, and then the code just linearly turns into RNA. A protein is actually doing multiple things, and it's in the cell being bombarded sometimes with lots of different molecules, and it needs to be able to recognize these different shapes and structures, and sometimes it has multiple functions. And this function of every protein depends on that 3D structure. So there are the folded shape means that there are like little pockets and grooves and surfaces that the protein uses to bind to other molecules or carry out specific chemical reactions or even receive signals and then change shape in response. And that means the same protein molecule might be doing multiple things at once. It could be doing a chemical reaction, but also binding to something else. And then when it gets some regulatory signal, it could be changing shape and stopping that chemical reaction from happening.
So there's benefits to being a weird blob. There's nothing wrong with being a weird blob.
I thought it would be fun if we both share some fun facts about proteins. I found these from the book Biology by the Numbers, which is a great textbook, and it's also free online. And the authors create these kind of rough estimates and pull together key numbers on lots of different things related to cell biology. And some of them are rough estimates, but they're kind of our best guess right now.
Hit me.
All right. First one. How many proteins are in a human cell?
They're busy, so I'm going to guess a lot. And I'm going to guess it depends on the cell, but I will go with 100 million.
That is a lot, and it does depend on the cell. But the estimate for the average number is 10 billion proteins per
Oh
cell.
no. 2 orders of magnitude wrong.
Which
Not a
is
good start. Okay. Well, I've got one which okay, which is bigger? The protein or the mRNA that codes for the protein?
um, surely the protein is bigger, no? Like, why would the instructions be bigger than
That's
the protein?
what I always think, and it's the other way around. So the mRNA is bigger. You look at them side by side, well, images of them, and the mRNA is like 10 times bigger because each amino acid is coded for by 3 nucleotides, and the nucleotides themselves are bigger and heavier. So it's yeah,
Ah,
it's counterintuitive to me, but
huh.
makes sense, I guess, when you think about it physically.
That does make sense. Well, I don't know if that makes sense. I feel like I need to think about this more.
Yeah, it doesn't make
Um,
sense from a computer science point of view, but from a physical point of view, it feels like
right.
yeah.
I have one.
Okay.
So, as a small person, I wanted to find out which protein was the smallest. Do you have any guesses?
The protein that's the smallest. Well, the definition of a protein, I wonder if I'm allowed to have it's got to have at least 2 amino acids. So I
Mhm.
know it's not going to be less than 2, but that probably wouldn't count as a protein because it wouldn't fold into anything, wouldn't have much function. So I'm going to guess philosophically 2 and then literally more than 2.
Well, you're right. So I think the typical definition of a protein is something that floats on its own in water and can fold into a stable shape.
Mm,
And if you use that definition, then the smallest ones are some 20 to 30 amino acids long. There are actually lots of really tiny proteins, and these tiny proteins are called microproteins, and they're, less than 100 amino acids or so. And one example that's actually even smaller than 20 or 30 is somatostatin, which is a hormone
right.
that controls other hormones. So it controls growth hormone and insulin. And that's only 14 amino acids long.
Oh, wow, that's that small. Oh, okay.
Right. It still has a stable shape because parts of the chain are connected to each other. So it's not considered a typical protein, but it's a peptide and it's very small.
Okay, what's the biggest? I think you know the answer to this one.
I think I do. Is it Titan?
It's tight. That's the biggest human protein, at least. I don't know outside of humans, but that one is 33,000 amino acids long.
What's the most abundant protein on Earth?
I am going to guess it has something to do with photosynthesis because that seems like one of the biggest functions on Earth.
Very good guess. It's kind of a tie, and we're not really sure which one is more abundant. That was a bit of a trick question.
Oh, wow.
But one of them is Rubisco,
Right.
and that is used in photosynthesis. It's used to grab carbon from the air and turn it into kind of useful organic material. And that's used by all photosynthetic organisms. And scientists estimate that there are about 5 kilograms of Rubisco per person on Earth.
Oh, my God. What? Wow. Um,
I guess there are a lot of plants.
yeah, fair enough. They're winning. They're winning for now.
There's actually the second, which might be ahead. We're not sure,
Oh, right. Yes.
and that is collagen. So
Right.
that
Okay.
is used as a kind of structural protein, and it makes up about 30% of the protein mass in your body. So about 3 kilograms of collagen per person. But it's not just humans that have collagen, it's also all the livestock and all the animals. And that means there's, well, the like total number, the total mass of livestock is also enormous, right? And so this means there's roughly 4 to 6 kilograms of collagen per person on Earth.
Ready for another fun fact?
Yes.
Well, enzymes are a type of protein that speed up reactions. So, how much do you think enzymes speed up reactions?
1,000 times, maybe 2,000. I feel like a lot,
A lot.
but I don't know.
A lot. And I bet some do 1,000, but if you're really looking at the the best of the best, we're talking billions of times and possibly trillions of times. So
Oh my God.
things there, we're talking millions of reactions per second per enzyme in some cases, and just totally changing what is happening at the molecular level.
That's crazy. That means, I guess, some reactions just wouldn't happen if the
Oh,
enzymes weren't there.
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, statistically speaking, yeah.
So we were talking about protein folding the other day, and I was thinking, well, how fast do proteins fold into shape? Do you have any guesses?
Oh, that is a tough one.
Hmm.
The folding has to happen quickly, otherwise, they'll get distracted by other forces. So I will go with oh, tenths of seconds, no, hundreds of seconds.
Pretty close. So on average, proteins fold in milliseconds, but some proteins fold really quickly, at, like in microseconds, which are a millionth of a second.
Okay.
And I
Wow.
guess you're right that it really does have to happen fast because there's so much other stuff going on in the cell. It could just be bombarded with something else before it folds.
Yeah. No fun.
Okay, I got another one.
Okay.
How fast are enzymes colliding with other molecules in the cell? Or how many collisions are there per second?
Okay. I have the sense that things are just crazy up in there and everyone's sort of bumping around. So I'm going to say 1,000 collisions a second.
Well, you were right with the
Oh,
idea,
no. I should have just
but
said a lot.
but I think the estimate is 500,000 molecules are colliding with an enzyme per second.
Wow.
And that's a lot. And that makes me think that proteins have to be really specific in how they bind to their targets. It's like, if you're at a really crowded party and you're trying to find a friend,
Yeah.
you would just bump into so many people before you actually find your friends. So
Yeah.
you have to actually be able to recognize them among the 500,000 random strangers around you.
Yep. That's tricky. Okay, Saloni, what's your favorite protein?
My favorite protein is tubulin. It's part of microtubules. So the microtubules are kind of the skeletons of your cells. That sounds a bit grim, actually. But they are basically formed of these hollow tubes that are made of this protein, and each of the little structures is kind of like a tiny corn kernel. And that tube can sort of assemble and disassemble in response to signals. And that means that the entire skeleton can kind of assemble and disassemble, which means the whole cell can change its shape or its
Mm.
size and move around because of these microtubules. And the microtubules also kind of act as tracks to move things around. So they're a bit like a cellular railway or something,
Right.
which I think is just super cool. And I remember learning about this in my undergrad and just seeing some diagrams and thinking, wow, that's amazing.
That's a good one. I have an even better one though, which is gluten and bread. Woo! I'm a bread guy.
That's a good one.
We each have our favorites.
This was the first of a series of mini episodes we're doing on proteins. Stay tuned for our next episode on the history of insulin. And if you like this, share it with your friends and subscribe.